Good evening and welcome to another Daijobu Kuma production for Arandria Scans, and the topic is going to be Typesetting 2, where we're going to talk briefly about the history of typesetting and how it's resulted in some of the conventions that we have when we're typesetting. When I grew up in the 60s, the mainstay of the comics, one of the living icons, was the artist Jack Kirby of Marvel Comics. Okay, this man is now considered one of the gods of American comics. He worked very closely with Stan Lee and also with Joe Sinnott as the inker and Artie Simek as the letterer. Now the reason we need to talk about Artie Simek, why it's so important, is because of the way they produced their comics. Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and others would sit down in kind of like a round table and brainstorm what the story was going to be. They didn't write a formal script. Out of this brainstorming, they would then develop what were called breakdowns. These were the initial pencil sketches and layout of the comic book. Now what's important here is that after they did the pencil breakdowns, as they're called, they then gave it to Artie Simek. And Artie Simek would then draw in and letter the word and thought balloons here so that the artist, when inking, Joe Sinnott, when inking, would know where to ink and where not to ink. It was very important. Now, this creative team in Marvel Comics helped to set the standards for a lot of the typesetting that we do today. And I've got here some examples to show you rather than flip through a whole bunch of computer images. I drew a cartoon here showing some of the most common examples of what we're going to be dealing with in typesetting and the different things. Now, let me elevate this just a little bit here so it's easier to read. Now, as you can see, we've got a sample storyboard of what's taking place. I've drawn it from the right to the left, Japanese style. We've got the caption box here. Then we have the normal dialogue and the word balloon. We have the small text, also known as an aside. Then over here we have an example that you'll often run into in manga when they're dealing with radios, radio communications, television, and robots. It's going to be the electronic speech, which will usually be in a different type font. Then we have the thought balloons, or as they're more commonly known as, the thinks. Then of course we have the shouts to indicate that somebody is shouting. Usually the balloon is jagged. Sometimes in the Japanese they'll have like double lines or some other convention to show shouting, but it will usually have the larger text. Then we have here what's called a flash. I wasn't sure what to call this. Then while I was doing proofreading, one of the translators called it a flash, and I thought that was a very good idea. But it essentially is a narration with the person's thoughts. Then we have, of course, the good old, much dreaded SFX, which is basically word art done over the art. And this is a particular challenge for people typesetting. And then, of course, we have the narration. The narration is a glimpse into the character's mind while they're in the middle of something. This is all aimed towards giving you an idea of what kind of organization is needed when you're doing the typesetting. It's best to have an organization set up where the text is divided into the things like the captions, the small text, the regular dialogue, the narration and the captions, and also things like the SFX. And that's what we're going to be covering in the next video, is how to organize those separate groups, as they're called.